Good morning, Algebra 1 students. I hope you've had a good weekend and you had a successful week last week in online teaching and learning. It's been a new experience for all of us. So I'm here with your Monday lessons. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to do some review. We're going to do the review for chapter 10 and then lesson 11.1. So I'm going to go over some key concepts I know that can be hard for students. I'm going to review those problems, and then in the next video I will do 11.1. So let's say a prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this day, for your goodness and grace. I just pray for my students that you would help them to focus and to learn well, to understand everything, to master all these concepts in chapter 10, that all of their questions would get answered so they all would do very well on their chapter 10 test. And you'd strengthen me and help me to use words to be the very best teacher I can for them. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so now I'm going to go away from the screen and the video will be moved to the projector on my living room wall. Of course, you might hear some noises in the background because I live at home and I'm teaching from home. So with children and dogs, you just never really know what's going to happen. Okay. So my husband is adjusting the camera, and as soon as we're ready, he'll let me know. Okay. So here's review for chapter 10. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do, my daughter is leaving. Bye, Nicole. Find the axis of symmetry. Hope you can read that okay. So this is and the vertex. This is the first problem that we're going to do. Okay. Y equals x squared plus 4x plus 11. Okay, now a formula that you're going to have to memorize is this. To find the axis of symmetry, I'm going to rewrite that S. You must use this formula. X equals negative b over 2a. X equals is an equation of a vertical line. So we're going to use our coefficients of a and b to figure out what that is. It's really not that hard. You just have to memorize the formula. So negative b would be negative 4 over 2, and then there's no number in front of x squared, so a would be a 1. And when I reduce that, I get negative 2. Okay, so the line x equals negative 2 would be my axis of symmetry. So that would look something like this right here. Okay, but we don't have to graph it right now. I just wanted you to understand again what that means. Now, the vertex is going to pass through the axis of symmetry, and the vertex is going to be the lowest or highest point for my equation. Now, if I look here, the sign in front of the x squared tells me that it's positive, so it's going to go up. I'm just guessing right now it's going to go up something like this. So my vertex is on the axis of symmetry, and I know the x coordinate, I just don't know the y coordinate. So to find the vertex after I have the axis of symmetry, all I have to do is substitute and solve for y. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite my equation. And I know that the x-coordinate is -2. So I'm going to put -2 in. Okay, so I took out the x and substituted the -2. So -2 squared is 4, and 4 times -2 is -8, plus 1. Okay, so if I add these all together, I get 4 and -8 is -4, plus 1 is -3. So the y-coordinate is -3. And my vertex is going to be at -2, -3. My phone is going, and as you know from class, because it's got liquid spilled on it, I can't turn down the volume. So there you go. Okay. That's number 1, to find the axis of symmetry and the vertex. Okay, that's the first most important concept. The second one is graphing. So we're going to graph y equals -x squared plus 2x plus 1. Okay, so I'm going to using the vertex and the axis of symmetry. So the first thing I want to find is my axis of symmetry. So here we go. X equals -b over 2a. And I look here, and b is 2, and a is -1. So I get -2. If b is 2 in my formula, I need -b. And then 2 times -1. That becomes -2 over -2, which is 1. So my axis of symmetry is x equals 1. That's the first thing that I need. Okay, so now I'm going to substitute. Remember, the axis of symmetry is also the x-coordinate of my vertex. So I'm going to substitute 1 into the equation. I'm going to rewrite it down here to find y. 1 squared plus 2 times 1 plus 1. Okay, so now be careful here. I'm going to square it first. Obviously, 1 times 1 is 1. And then I multiply by a -1 on the outside. And that's how I get -1. Plus 2 plus 1. So if I add all of those together, -1 plus 2 plus 1, I get 2. So the y value of my vertex goes here, and the vertex is at 1, 2. All right, so now we're going to graph this. I'm going to change to graph paper. And I'm going to make a table. So I have, now let's see. Let's graph the axis of symmetry and the vertex first. Okay, so here's my graph. I'm going to change colors in order to show the difference. Let's use black. Okay. So x equals 1. That's the axis of symmetry. So that's right here. X is always 1. It's a vertical line. And my vertex was 1, 2. So that's right here. Okay, so now I've got that. and I'm going to finish my table. Now, the points that I choose are going to be points that are around my vertex, because I know what's important is how this curve develops here, right from the vertex, okay? So that's at 1, and I know it's 1, 2, right? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to pick points, x values, that are around 1. Here's 1 right here. What is around 1? Well, at where x is 0, that's next to 1. Where x is 2, that's on the other side, so we're going to put 0 in and 2 in. Okay. And then what would be one more removed? So I've got 1 here, 2, 3 would be 2 over. And going the other way, 0, -1. Okay, so my vertex, just to review that again, because I remember in class some of you were struggling with that. My vertex is at 1, x equals 1. What values for x are near that? Right close by, I've got, in this direction, 1 and 2 for x, and in the other direction, I have 0 and -1. So those are the numbers that I chose here for my x values. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite so I can see it down here easily, my equation. If I put 0 in for x, 0 is there. I've got 0 there, 2 times 0. What happens to those two terms? That's usually the easiest one. They drop out. And what's left? Just 1. So these become 0, and this becomes 1. Okay, let's put 2 in. So I have -2 squared plus 2 times 2 plus 1. Okay. So here 2 squared is 4, and it's negative. And I also get 1. This was 1. -4 and 4 is 0, plus 1 is 1. So I'm going to have a 1 there. Okay, let's start graphing those and see where they are. So I have 1, 2, 0, 1, and 2, 1. Do you see how that's shaping up? I know because the x term is negative, this is going to go downward. It's going to be a downward curve. All right? So I can see how this is shaping up. So let's put 3 in. -3 squared plus 2 times 3 plus 1. This becomes -9 plus 6 plus 1 is -2. Okay, so 3 is -2. So I'm going to go down here. Now we talked about this in class. I can generate all the points using the substitution. Let's do that. The last point I chose was -1. So let's put -1 in. -1 squared is 1 times a negative is -1. And I get -2. Now what do you notice? Sorry, that's hard to read. What do you notice? -1, 2. They mirror each other, don't they? So if I find this point, I don't actually have to do all the work to find the other one on the other side of the axis of symmetry. Because by definition, the axis of symmetry cuts it in half and creates a mirror. Okay, so this comes down like this, and this comes down like this. Okay, so there's our graph. Isn't that pretty? Now it says, also in our book on several problems, how does this compare to y equals x squared? Okay, so let's look at that. If I graphed y equals x squared, it would be right here. It goes up like this. In blue. That's the parent equation. I don't know if you remember us talking about that. That means y equals x squared. That's what the parent equation is. How do they compare? Well, I would say our new graph is a little wider. No, it's actually about the same. Is the same width. And goes down. So our parent equation goes up. And our equation goes downward. So that would be our answer there. Okay, I'm going to do one more problem with you for review, or two actually. I want to actually do a completing the square with you, and then a word problem. I think that you guys can handle the quadratic formula just fine and solve using square roots. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to red. And here we go, number 3. Solve by completing the square. Okay, here's our problem. Plus 12x equals 18. Okay, so we want to get an answer for x, and we've got several methods. We can solve using square roots, we can use the quadratic formula, and we can complete the square. So to do that, the first thing you do is ask yourself, are there any common factors? And if so, then you factor them out. Okay, so I'm looking here, and only 2 terms have x's, 18 doesn't, but they all are divisible by 3. So I'm going to divide every term by 3. And that will just disappear, just take my word for it. When you're factoring like this, if you divide out a 3, it would just disappear if you had left it. So we're going to make this x squared plus 4x equals 6. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Now, to complete the square, I want this side of the equation to become a perfect square. Either a number like x squared, or a problem like x squared, or x minus 1 squared like this, or this, or this, where I have on the other side over here, I have something like this, because then I can take the square root of it and find an answer. Now remember, I can do anything I want to both sides of the equation, as long as I do it to both sides. So I'm going to make room. And I'm going to add the same thing to both sides. Well, what am I going to add? What I do is I take the value of b, I divide it by 2, and I square it. I thought the gal who did the teaching video did a really good job of showing this, but she's not for everybody. So anyway, here's me doing it. So b is 4, so I'm going to put 4 in. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Squared is 4. So what I'm going to add to both sides is 4. Okay? So I'm going to put 4 here. Remember, I can do anything I want to both sides of the equation. Anything I want. I want to multiply, subtract, add. As long as I do it to both sides, it's legal. It's just like if you had a scale. And let's say you had a pound on one side, like you had a scale, you know. You have 2 pounds over here and 2 pounds over here. It's level. It's balanced, isn't it? Well, I can add 2 more if I want, and it will stay balanced if I add 2 more to that side. If I take 1 away, it will stay balanced as long as I take only 1 away from this side. Do you see how that works? So that's why I can do that. Now this is kind of messy, so I'm going to rewrite it down here. And now I'm going to solve. So the first thing I do is add 6 and 4. Now, what I want to do here is use magic X. So what multiplies to be 4 and adds to be 4? Well, obviously 2 and 2. And if I'm completing the square, these must be the same. My factors must be the same. Okay? So, I've got 2 and 2. So I'm going to have x plus 2 times x plus 2. Which means I can write it like this. X plus 2 and x plus 2 are the same. This was the whole purpose of completing the square. I completed the square. The binomial here is a square. I completed it, meaning I added something to both sides. Because now I can take the square root and get x by itself. So I'm going to take the square root, and the square root and the power of 2 cancel, so I get x plus 2 equals the square root of 10. And then, actually that's plus or minus, isn't it? And then I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 10. And that, my dear students, is the answer. The smarter and older you are, the less like it works out perfectly. So that's just what it is. Now in the book, they should have that written. If they don't, then they will have a decimal for that. So if I use my calculator, I will get negative 2 plus or minus 3.16. So I have negative 2. And then here I subtract and get 1.16 or 5.16 negative. So it depends on the lesson and the book that you have. Sometimes they'll give you the square root answer, and if that's not there, then you have to use a calculator to figure out the decimal. Okay, so that is completing the square. Woohoo! All right, one more problem and then we'll be done. for review. This is number 4. An arch to the entrance of the library can be modeled by y equals negative 0.13 x squared plus 2.5x. So there's an arch at the library, and if you actually made the arch, drew a line to it, the equation of that parabola would be what we have here. Okay? Where x and y are measured in feet. To the nearest foot what is the height of the highest point of the arch? Okay, so I'll give you a minute and let you write that down. Okay, so if we have an arch, what we're looking for, the highest point of the arch would be right there. That would be the maximum. Another word for that is the vertex. Woohoo! So all we have to do is use our vertex formula, axis of symmetry, and find x and y. So let's do that. I have negative 0.13 y equals, sorry about that, x squared plus 2.5x, okay. So we just have a few decimals to work with. They're actually not bad. So I have x equals negative b over 2a. I'm using my axis of symmetry formula to find the x coordinate of the vertex. So that would be negative 2.5 over 2 times negative 0.13. So I get negative 2.5 over negative 2.6. And if I work that out with the decimal and a calculator, I get 9.6 feet. So the x coordinate is 9.6 feet. Okay, so now once I have the x coordinate, I substitute to find y. So I have 9.6. I'm going to substitute that back in here. So y equals negative 0.13. I'm going to put 9.6 here. Alright. I'll wait just a moment for you to catch up. Again, you know, the great thing about video is that you can pause this. So if I'm moving too fast, just pause it until you can catch up. Or rewind it and listen to it again. That's why I really like using this format of teaching you, because it's a video. You can look at it when it's convenient for you. You can stop it. You can rewind it. It becomes a teaching tool that's customized to your needs. The only thing I can't do is answer live questions, but we're working on it. Okay, so if I square 9.6 and multiply by negative 0.13, I'll just tell you that works out to be negative 11.98. And when I multiply 2.5 times 9.6, I get 24.5. And when I subtract those two numbers, I get 12.25, which is about 13 feet. Okay, so let's talk about what this means. It means we have an arch, and our formula represents this curved equation. Right? And the highest point there, so you would walk through, and you want to know, what is that? Well, it is 9.6 feet over and 13 feet up, like on a graph. So if you were standing, not there, but you were standing right underneath the top of the arch, it would be 13 feet tall, and you would be 9.6 feet out from the side. So that's what that means right there. All right, so I will put your homework in the email, and we will go on to lesson 11.1. I hope you do well on all this, and we will follow up with getting you ready for the Chapter 10 test. See you soon. Bye.